I haven't always lived the life that I live today. I was very much a man that never had any awareness of who God is, or even that he existed. A man that wore many masks, whether that be masks of pride, masks of ego.
Dude, son, ain't even a word. You get them people out there that hate on you, even though you you. But let's get set straight. This is James Conley style. Not only style, shines, motherfucker. Woo!
Or in fact, any mask that was needed or necessary for the current circumstance at hand.
I'm trying to get rich, so real talk. If it ain't about who's forced to put pen to paper, who's forced to put gas in London, all them guys looking at this Porsche. What you gonna do though? Stop and believe though. Follow your dreams though. In time soon though, you might succeed though. Most men think they can get through the east though. Simple and rolling the D's though. Go back to struggling.
A very weak man, but a man that refused to show any weakness on the surface. A man that understood that violence was a way to deal with situations. A man that was bound by all kinds of different drugs, bound to the criminal lifestyle, and bound to being a menace in society. I was a man that looked and reached for all different avenues of ways to go to step away from the life that I lived, and nothing worked for me. But what did work was Jesus Christ, and this is my testimony. My testimony. What do I mean when I say my testimony? See, it says in the book of Revelations that we have overcome the enemy by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And my testimony is me testifying of what the Lord Jesus Christ has done for me. I've not always been an evangelist. I've not always been a Christian, definitely not. I grew up in a household that was very dysfunctional. I grew up with a lot of alcoholism around me. I grew up very troubled, a lot of abuse, and all different spectrums, physical, mental, and emotional. And from a very young age in school, I was a very troubled child that used to be very disruptive and cause many problems, excluded from many schools in the past. And I grew up from the age of 15 selling drugs. And from the age of 16, moving out of my household and moving in with local drug dealers, where I felt like I found identity in gangs, found identity on the streets. See, the streets is a place that I was in most of the time. Whether that be selling drugs, whether that be getting into petty crimes at the beginning, whether that be chilling with people on the streets. And that's where I felt like I found my identity. And after a short amount of time, one of my friends told me about these raves that used to happen in warehouses. They told me about these raves that were illegal, that you could take drugs in there, no one will stop you, and you're free to do whatever you want. And I spent a lot of time in these places. I spent a lot of time meeting the people there, and eventually I got myself to a place where I myself was organizing these raves. I myself was getting the buildings necessary for these places.
The warehouse used for Havoc's night had been acquired by a guy called Jimmy White, a 22-year-old veteran of this young scene with 6 years experience in the game.
Whereabouts are we going now? Just literally, it's just over the road, and we're going down there and then gonna see and get into this one quickly.
Jimmy had a reputation for sourcing the best locations for parties, keeping them on ice until they were rave ready, and using his knowledge of squatting laws to circumvent the police until they can sneak the speakers and the punters in.
And the more and more I grew in the criminal world, the more and more the drugs increased. It started off with MDMA, that went on to cocaine, then ketamine. And before I knew it, I got my life into a position where I was taking crack and heroin. I remember there was a time that I was sitting on the streets begging, and a man came up to me and he spoke to me about taking a job. And see, what that job was selling drugs in nightclubs. And it was selling drugs in nightclubs, but the security were allowing us to do it if they was being paid. And then I progressed in that area of life. I progressed in that criminal way of living, to the point that I was selling drugs in multiple nightclubs. I had people selling drugs for me. I was buying firearms just in case anything happened, getting into fights in nightclubs. And my ego and my pride was growing and growing and growing and growing, to the point where if there was another dealer in the nightclub, I would begin a fight with them and get the security to kick them out. Life got really, really bad for me. And see, it got to the point where I was about 45 kilos. I was very skinny. I remember I went to see my dad in Devon after a very long time, and I stayed in the hotel there because I didn't want to stay at my dad's house, because I wanted to continue being able to drink alcohol and take drugs without anyone telling me I couldn't. And I met my dad for a breakfast once. And when I met him, he didn't know what had happened to me. He didn't understand why I was so skinny in the way that I did. Here's a picture of what I look like. And as you can see on my dad's face, he was very disappointed. But see, I was under a lot of delusion at the time. I was in a position in life that I didn't even see what other people saw. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see that there was an issue. I was filled with so much pride and ego that I didn't think anything was wrong with me. It got so bad to the point where the drugs began to run out, so I didn't even have money to sell drugs anymore. So I had to begin to rob people for drugs. And see, that brought in a different ball game. There was a lot of violence. It got to the point where I ended up getting kidnapped myself. And when I got kidnapped myself, I got beaten for the course of 4 hours. I had all kinds of weapons used against me. I got stabbed twice in my leg and in my lower leg, and things got really bad. But at the same time, during that time, I felt an essence of peace. I felt like everything was going to be okay. When I left there, I ran to my friend's house and collapsed at his door. My face was completely disfigured. I was running down with blood. I got into the resuscitation. I was throwing up blood. I remember my mum looking at me, wondering what was wrong. Was I going to be okay? The doctors were looking at her. And throwing up blood in resuscitation is not a good sign. But after a couple of days, I ended up getting better, and I woke up in that ward. And the hospitals were going a bit crazy because it was when COVID was coming through, and I remember waking up not even understanding what COVID was because I was so lost in the drug world that I didn't even know what was going on in the world. I ended up coming out of hospital, and when I came out of hospital, the drug use was still going on. I remember screaming and shouting on streets, calling my family, trying to take money off them for drugs, until it come to the point where I got down on my knees. And I remember it like it was yesterday. I got down on my knees and screamed out for God, screamed out for help. And I remember it like it was yesterday that I felt an overwhelming sensation of His presence, curled up into a fetus on the floor, crying, being comforted, and woken up the next day, and I never used drugs again. The desire for drugs left me, and something new was happening on the inside of me. And see, today I live a life that goes around telling people about this hope that I found, about God that I found in a desperate place in my bedroom, to let people know that that hope is an offer for them too. So I'm just here to encourage you right now. If God can save a wretched soul like me, He can do it for anyone. See, I knew about God long before I was in my bedroom and I gave my life to Jesus Christ. See, for about 10 years, evangelists were coming my way, little messages were coming forth, and the Lord was drawing me to Him for a very long time. And seeds were being sown over them 10 years. So just to encourage you, a seed that you sow, the Lord will water. And then someone will come in and continue to nurture to that seed and so forth. So no seed ever returns void. It took 10 years for me to come to Christ and submit to Him. So I just want to encourage you. Anyone that you know that's going through life, that you are sowing seeds of Christ into their life, not one seed is ever sown in vain. Just trust the Lord that He will water. It doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what you've done. There is justification at the cross, that you're in the courtroom and you've got all of the allegations of what you've done in your life against you. And see, Jesus comes in and he says, I've paid the debt, and wipes the slate clean. And see, when you come to him, he creates you into a new creation, and life will never be the same.